The honeybees moved in their usual patterns around the wooden boxes, creating a soft hum that filled the morning air. Owen Bennett walked slowly between the rows of hives, his worn boots crunching on the dry grass. He had been keeping bees for 15 years now, ever since he retired from teaching and moved to this quiet corner of Thornwood Colony. The work was simple and peaceful, exactly what he wanted after 40 years of noisy classrooms and endless meetings. He stopped at the last hive near the forest edge, the one that always produced the darkest, richest honey. Something seemed different today. The bees were flying in confused circles instead of their normal straight paths. Owen frowned and moved closer, his eyes scanning the ground around the hive box. Two small shapes huddled beneath the wooden structure. At first, Owen thought they might be injured animals from the forest. Thornwood had plenty of wildlife that sometimes wandered onto farms looking for food, but as he knelt down for a better look, his breath caught in his throat. They were not animals, at least not any animals he recognized from Earth or from the colonial databases. The creatures were roughly the size of large cats, with scales that shimmered in dull shades of bronze and silver. Small wings, torn and damaged, lay folded against their backs. Their heads were reptilian, with large eyes that watched him with a mix of fear and desperate hope. One of them made a soft chirping sound, almost like a bird, and extended a tiny clawed hand toward him. Owen had seen enough nature documentaries to know when a creature was dying. These two were close to that edge. Their scales looked dry and cracked. Their breathing was shallow and rapid. Dark stains marked their bodies where wounds had tried to heal but failed. "Easy now," Owen said softly, the same tone he used to use with frightened students on their first day of school. "I am not going to hurt you," the smaller creature chirped again, louder this time. The sound carried a weight that Owen felt somewhere deep in his chest, like a pulse of pure emotion. Fear. Pain. Please help. He had no idea what these creatures were or where they came from, but he knew he could not leave them here to die. Owen carefully removed his light jacket and spread it on the ground. Moving slowly so he would not startle them, he reached under the hive box. The larger creature hissed weakly, showing tiny sharp teeth, but did not pull away. Owen gently lifted it onto the jacket, then reached for the smaller one. This one did not resist at all. It simply curled into his palm, its body cold despite the warm morning. He bundled them both in the jacket and carried them toward his farmhouse. The bees continued their confused flying patterns behind him, as if they too sensed something important had just happened. Inside his home, Owen cleared space near the fireplace and laid out several thick blankets. He placed the creatures on the soft surface and added more wood to the fire, building the heat slowly. The smaller one immediately crawled closer to the flames, seeking warmth. The larger one watched Owen with suspicious eyes but did not move away from the fire either. Owen hurried to his kitchen and filled a shallow bowl with clean water. He also grabbed some of his honey, the pure raw kind he kept for himself, and mixed it with warm water. He had no idea if these creatures could drink honey water, but it was the best option he had right now. When he returned to the fireplace, he set the water bowl near them. The smaller creature sniffed at it, then began lapping at the water with a thin, forked tongue. The larger one waited a moment longer before joining in. They drank like they had not seen water in days, maybe weeks. Owen sat back on his heels and pulled out his old data pad. He activated the scanner function and pointed it at the creatures. The device hummed for a moment, then displayed results that made his eyes widen. Species: Drachnir. Classification: sentient. Status: critically endangered. Intelligence level: high dragons. He had found dragon children. Owen knew about the Drachnir from the colonial news feeds. They were an old and powerful species, respected throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and strength. They rarely interacted with human colonies, preferring to keep to their own worlds and traditions. What were two Drachnir children doing alone on Thornwood, injured and starving? He scrolled through more information on his datapad, reading quickly. Drachnir hatchlings required constant warmth, high-protein food, and the presence of family members to develop properly. Separation from their colony could cause permanent damage or death. Owen looked at the two small creatures now curled together near his fire. The smaller one had fallen asleep, its breathing finally steady and deep. The larger one still watched him, but its eyes were starting to close as well. "Where is your family?" Owen asked quietly, though he knew they could not answer him in words. The larger creature made a low sound, almost like a sad musical note. That strange feeling pulsed through Owen's chest again. This time it carried a different emotion. Loss. Loneliness. Gone. Owen felt his throat tighten. He did not know what had happened to these children, or how they ended up under his beehive. But he knew one thing with complete certainty. He was not going to let them die. He settled into his chair near the fireplace, his datapad open to articles about Drachnir biology and care. The hatchlings slept on, their small bodies finally relaxed and warm. Outside, the bees returned to their normal patterns and the sun climbed higher in the sky. Owen Bennett had woken up that morning thinking it would be just another quiet day on his farm. Instead, his life had just become far more complicated than he ever could have imagined. 3 days had passed since Owen found the hatchlings, and his small farmhouse had transformed into something resembling a nursery. Blankets covered every surface near the fireplace. Bowls of water and food sat in careful arrangements on the floor. His datapad lay open on the table, displaying pages of research about Drachnir biology that he had read so many times he practically had them memorized. The smaller hatchling, the one Owen had started calling Pip because of its constant chirping sounds, had recovered faster than expected. It followed Owen everywhere now, tiny claws clicking on the wooden floors as it tried to keep up with his longer steps. Sometimes Pip would grab onto Owen's pant leg and simply hang there, making satisfied humming noises, until Owen picked it up and carried it. The larger hatchling was more cautious. Owen called this one Flicker, because its scales seemed to shimmer and change shade when it moved. Flicker would watch Owen from a distance, those intelligent eyes tracking his every movement. But slowly, carefully, the trust was building. Yesterday, Flicker had eaten food directly from Owen's hand for the first time instead of waiting until he walked away. Owen had learned that the hatchlings were not just animals following instinct. They were people young and scared and lost, but definitely people. They understood when he spoke to them. They had preferences and personalities. Pip loved the honey water mixture Owen made and would drink it eagerly. Flicker preferred plain water and would push the honey bowl away with one small foot. The most surprising discovery had come 2 nights ago. Owen had been reading aloud from one of his old books, just filling the silence the way he used to do in his classroom. Both hatchlings had stopped what they were doing and moved closer, their eyes fixed on him. When he paused, Pip had made an urgent chirping sound and that strange feeling had pulsed through his chest. The emotion was clear. Keep going. We like this. So Owen had continued reading, and the hatchlings had curled up at his feet, listening to a human story they could not possibly understand. Yet somehow they seemed content just hearing his voice. Now, as morning light filtered through the windows, Owen sat at his kitchen table trying to solve a problem. The hatchlings were healing physically. Their scales had brightened to shining bronze and silver. Their wings, while still too damaged for flight, no longer looked painful. They moved with more energy and curiosity each day, but they were still children who needed their family. Owen had spent hours searching through colonial records and galactic databases, trying to find any information about missing Drachnir in this sector. The search had been frustrating and fruitless until late last night, when he finally found something, an incident report from 3 months ago. A Drachnir family vessel had been attacked near the outer edge of the Thornwood system. The ship was destroyed. All aboard were listed as dead. 2 adult Drachnir, 4 elder family members, and 5 hatchlings. Owen had read that report over and over, his heart sinking each time. The hatchlings at his feet were from that ship. They had to be. Which meant their entire family was gone, killed by pirates who attacked civilian vessels for cargo and credits. Pip chirped from somewhere near the fireplace, and Owen looked up. The small hatchling had discovered the pile of firewood and was trying to stack pieces into a careful arrangement. Flicker sat nearby, watching with what looked like amusement as Pip's tower kept falling over. How had these 2 survived? How had they ended up in the forest near his farm, weeks or months after their ship was destroyed? Owen pulled up more files on his datapad. He found incident photos of the wreckage, salvage reports, investigation notes. Most of the ship had been scattered across space. But there was mention of an emergency pod that had never been recovered. A small escape unit designed for hatchlings. The pieces came together in Owen's mind. Someone on that ship, probably in the last seconds before destruction, had put the hatchlings in the emergency pod and launched it. The pod had made it to Thornwood, probably crash landing in the deep forest. The hatchlings had survived the crash but found themselves alone on a strange world. They had crawled or walked for days, maybe weeks, searching for shelter and warmth, until they found his beehives with their constant humming and gentle heat. Owen set down the data pad and rubbed his eyes. He needed to contact the authorities. The Drachnir people had to be told that 2 of their children had survived. But even as he thought this, a cold fear settled in his stomach. What would happen when the Drachnir came for them? He looked at Pip and Flicker again. Pip had finally managed to stack 3 pieces of wood and was chirping triumphantly. Flicker had moved closer and was using one claw to steady the tower so Pip could add a 4th piece. They were so young. So vulnerable. They had already lost everything once. Owen stood up and walked over to the hatchlings. Both turned to look at him, and he felt that emotional pulse from them. Happiness, safety, home. The feeling made his chest ache. He knelt down and reached out slowly. Pip immediately climbed into his lap, curling up like a scaly cat. Flicker hesitated, then moved closer too, pressing against his side. Owen carefully put one arm around each of them, feeling their steady breathing, their growing warmth. "I need to find your people," Owen said quietly. "You deserve to be with other Drachnir, to learn about your culture and your history. But I promise you this, I will not let anyone take you away if it will hurt you. I will not let anyone make you feel lost and alone again." Pip chirped softly. Flicker made that low musical sound. The emotion that flowed from them was simple and pure. Trust. Owen sat there on the floor with 2 dragon children in his arms, knowing that his quiet retirement had ended forever. Whatever happened next, whatever difficult choices lay ahead, he would face them. Because these 2 small creatures had chosen him when they had nothing else, and he would not fail them. The Colonial Administration building sat in the center of Thornwood's main settlement, a simple structure of local stone and imported steel. Owen had not visited it in years, preferring to handle his business through remote channels. But this matter required a personal touch, and more importantly, it required him to see the faces of the people he was dealing with. He had left Pip and Flicker with his neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, a kind woman who had raised 7 children of her own and handled the hatchlings' nervous energy with calm efficiency. The separation had been hard. Both hatchlings had chirped anxiously as Owen walked away, and he had felt their distress like a physical weight on his chest. But he needed to do this properly, through official channels, to protect them. Administrator Lee was a young woman, probably in her early 30s, with sharp eyes and an efficient manner. She listened to Owen's story without interruption, her fingers occasionally tapping notes into her workstation. When he finished, she sat back and looked at him with an expression somewhere between sympathy and concern. 2 Drachnir hatchlings, she said slowly. Survivors of the incident 3 months ago. You are certain? The timeline matches, Owen replied. The location matches. Everything matches. Lee pulled up files on her screen, scanning quickly. The official report lists all passengers as deceased. If you are right, this is significant news. The Drachnir Council will want to know immediately. That is why I am here. You understand what this means? Lee's voice was gentle now. The Drachnir take their young very seriously. They have strict laws about child rearing and cultural education. If these hatchlings are who you think they are, their people will come for them. Owen had known this was coming, but hearing it said aloud still made his stomach clench. I understand. Tell me about their condition, Lee said. Are they healthy? Do they seem traumatized? They were near death when I found them, Owen explained. Dehydrated, malnourished, injured, but they have recovered well physically. Emotionally, they are cautious but learning to trust. They communicate through sounds and through something else. Something I feel rather than hear. Emotions maybe, Lee nodded. Empathic projection. Drachnir hatchlings develop that ability early. It helps them bond with their family groups. She paused. Have they bonded with you? Yes, Owen said quietly. I think they have. Lee's expression shifted to something sadder. That will complicate things. Drachnir psychology is complex. Hatchlings who lose their birth families can be integrated into new families, but the process is delicate. If they have already imprinted on you, separation could cause significant psychological harm. I have been reading about that, Owen admitted. That is part of why I am here. I need to do this right for their sake. I will contact the Drachnir Council through official channels, Lee said. It may take several days to get a response, possibly longer. In the meantime, Continue caring for them as you have been. Document everything. If there are questions about your treatment of them, we will need records." Owen agreed and left the building with a heavy heart. He knew he had done the right thing, but that did not make it easier. When he returned to Mrs. Okafor's house, both hatchlings rushed to him immediately. Pip climbed up his leg and onto his shoulder, chirping frantically. Flicker wrapped around his ankle, making that low musical sound that meant relief and joy. The emotional wave that hit Owen was overwhelming. They had thought he was gone. They had thought he left them. "Never," Owen whispered, gathering Flicker into his arms while Pip clung to his shoulder. "I will never leave you without coming back." Mrs. Okafor watched from her doorway with knowing eyes. "They are special, those two. I can see why you are fighting for them." "I am not fighting yet," Owen said, "just trying to do what is right." Sometimes those are the same thing. The next 5 days passed in a strange state of waiting. Owen continued his normal routine as much as possible. He tended his bees with Pip and Flicker following close behind. The hatchlings had developed a fascination with the hives. Pip discovered that the bees would land on its scales and walk around, seemingly unbothered by the dragon's presence. Flicker learned to produce small puffs of warm air from its nostrils, which made the bees drowsy and calm. Owen found himself teaching them the way he used to teach his students, explaining how the hives worked, how the bees communicated, how the honey was made. The hatchlings listened intently, their large eyes fixed on him, absorbing everything. On the evening of the 5th day, Owen's datapad chimed with an urgent message. Administrator Lee was requesting his presence immediately. The Drachnir had responded. Owen arrived at the administration building to find it was not just Lee waiting for him. 3 Drachnir stood in the main hall, and Owen's breath caught at the sight of them. They were magnificent. Each stood nearly 8 feet tall in their upright posture, their scales gleaming in shades of deep crimson, gold, and midnight blue. Their wings, folded against their backs, still managed to fill the space with presence. Their faces were reptilian but expressive, showing intelligence and something that looked like carefully controlled emotion. The eldest of the 3 stepped forward. She was the one with midnight blue scales that seemed to contain tiny stars. Her voice when she spoke was deep and resonant, with harmonics that Owen could feel in his bones. "I am Sirath of the Paraxis clan," she said. "You are Owen Bennett, the human who found our lost children?" Owen nodded, not trusting his voice. "We have come to see them," Sirath continued, "to verify that they are indeed the survivors of the vessel Bright Wing, and to bring them home." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Owen forced himself to speak calmly. "They are at my farm. I can take you there now." Sirath studied him with eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "You care for them. This is obvious in your voice. That is good. We honor those who protect the helpless. I did what anyone would do." "No," Sirath said simply. "You did what few would do. Now let us see these children who survived the impossible." The transport ride back to Owen's farm was silent and tense. The 3 Drachnir had folded themselves into the vehicle with practiced ease, though their size made the space feel cramped. Owen sat in front, his mind racing with worries about what would happen next. He had sent a message ahead to Mrs. Okafor, asking her to bring Pip and Flicker back to his house. He wanted the hatchlings to be in familiar surroundings when they met their own people. When they arrived at the farm, Owen led the Drachnir delegation toward his house. The door was already open, and he could see Mrs. Okafor inside, sitting calmly in a chair while the hatchlings explored the room. The moment Owen stepped through the doorway, both Pip and Flicker rushed to him with excited chirps and musical sounds. Then they saw the adult Drachnir behind him, and everything changed. Pip froze mid-step, then scrambled backward, hiding behind Owen's legs. Flicker made a sound Owen had never heard before, something between a hiss and a terrified cry, and darted under the kitchen table. The emotional wave that struck Owen was like a punch to the chest. Terror, panic, run. Sirath stopped immediately, holding up one clawed hand to signal her companions to stay back. She looked at Owen with an expression that might have been sadness. "They do not recognize us," she said quietly. "They have been alone too long." Owen knelt down, feeling Pip trembling against his leg. He reached under the table and gently coaxed Flicker out, gathering both hatchlings close. They pressed against him, making frightened sounds, their eyes fixed on the adult Drachnir with clear fear. "It is all right," Owen murmured, using the same soothing tone he had used since the first day. "They are not going to hurt you. They are your people. They came to find you." Sirath moved forward slowly, lowering herself until she was on the same level as the hatchlings. She began making sounds, complex patterns of clicks and musical notes that Owen could not hope to imitate. The other two Drachnir joined in, creating a harmony that filled the room with sound and emotion. Owen felt the emotional projection, though it was not directed at him. Safety, family, home. You are not alone anymore. Pip's trembling slowed. Flicker raised its head slightly, curiosity starting to overcome fear. The hatchlings made tentative sounds in response, awkward and unpracticed, but clearly trying to communicate in the same way. Sirath responded with gentle encouragement, her voice patient and warm. The conversation, if it could be called that, continued for several minutes. Owen simply held the hatchlings, letting them feel his steady presence while they navigated this frightening moment. Finally, Sirath sat back and looked at Owen. "They are indeed survivors of the Bright Wing. I recognize the family patterns in their speech, though they have forgotten much. The small one is Piprixal, daughter of my cousin. The larger is Flickrath, son of my nephew. They were hatchlings of barely 3 seasons when the ship was attacked." Owen felt his throat tighten. They had names. Real names given by families that were now dead. "What happened?" he asked. "How did they survive?" "The emergency pod," one of the other Drachnir said, his voice heavy. "We found the crash site in your forest 2 days ago, following Administrator Lee's coordinates. The pod was badly damaged but functional enough to protect them on landing. They must have crawled for many days before reaching your farm. 2 children, the third Drachnir said, and her voice broke slightly. Alone in a forest on an alien world, injured and scared. It is a miracle they lived." Sirath turned her attention back to the hatchlings, who had relaxed somewhat but still clung to Owen. "They have imprinted on you," she said. "This is a complication we did not anticipate." "What does that mean?" Owen asked, though he suspected he already knew. Drachnir hatchlings bond with their primary caregivers during critical developmental periods, Sirath explained. "It is an evolutionary adaptation that ensures they stay close to those who protect them. Piprixal and Flickrath have bonded with you during this period. To them you are family now. You are safety. You are home." Mrs. Okafor, who had been silent until now, spoke up from her chair. "What happens when you try to separate children from their bonded caregiver?" Sirath's expression was grave. "Psychological trauma. Developmental regression. In severe cases, they may stop eating, stop speaking. Some do not recover. So you cannot take them," Owen said, relief and fear mixing in his chest. "That is not entirely accurate," Sirath replied. "We can take them. By law and custom, Drachnir hatchlings belong with their people, raised in the traditions and knowledge of their ancestors. But if we separate them from you by force, we will damage them, perhaps permanently." "Then what do we do?" Sirath stood, her full height making Owen feel very small. The other 2 Drachnir moved to flank her, and together they seemed to fill the entire room with their presence. "I need time to observe," Sirath said, "to understand the depth of their bond with you and to assess their well-being. The Drachnir Council has authorized me to make decisions regarding these hatchlings, but I will not make those decisions hastily." "How long?" Owen asked. 3 days, Sirath replied. "I and my companions will remain on Thornwood for 3 days. We will visit your farm each day to interact with Piprixal and Flickrath. We will evaluate their development, their health, and their emotional state. At the end of 3 days, I will decide what is best for them." Owen nodded slowly. It was fair, more than fair considering the circumstances. "You are welcome here any time." Sirath looked at the hatchlings again, still pressed against Owen's sides. When she spoke, her voice carried something that sounded like respect. "You have done well by our children, Owen Bennett. Whatever I decide in 3 days, know that the Drachnir people are in your debt. You saved lives that we thought were lost forever." The 3 Drachnir left shortly after, promising to return the next morning. Owen sat on the floor with Pip and Flicker, feeling the weight of the next 3 days pressing down on him. Mrs. Okafor made him tea before she left, squeezing his shoulder with wordless support. As night fell, Owen read to the hatchlings as usual, his voice steady despite his racing thoughts. They fell asleep curled against him, safe and content in this moment, unaware of the impossible decision that was coming. The 3 days passed like a strange dream. Each morning, Sirath and her companions arrived at Owen's farm as the sun climbed above the horizon. They would spend hours with Pip and Flicker, teaching them words in the Drachnir language, showing them how to properly fold their wings, demonstrating the complex emotional harmonies that their species used for communication. Owen watched these lessons with mixed feelings. He was glad to see the hatchlings learning about their heritage, connecting with their culture. But each lesson was also a reminder that he could never give them what the adult Drachnir could. He was human. He could teach them to read English, to care for bees, to understand human customs, but he could not teach them to be Drachnir. On the afternoon of the second day, Sirath asked to speak with Owen privately. They walked together through his bee yard, the hatchlings playing nearby under the watchful eyes of Sirath's companions. "You have created a good life here," Sirath said, gesturing at the organized hives and well-maintained equipment. "Simple but good, peaceful. It suits me," Owen replied. "After 40 years of teaching, I wanted quiet. Yet you took in 2 dying hatchlings without hesitation. That does not seem like the action of someone who wants quiet." Owen smiled slightly. "No, I suppose not. But I could not leave them to die. What kind of person would that make me?" Sirath was quiet for a moment, watching Pip chase a butterfly while Flicker tried to climb onto a hive box. "Among my people there is a saying, the measure of a soul is not in words spoken, but in actions taken when no one is watching. You took action, Owen Bennett. You saved our children when you could have walked away. Anyone would have done the same." "You keep saying that," Sirath observed, "but it is not true. Many would have been afraid. Many would have seen alien creatures and called authorities without getting involved. You saw children who needed help and you helped them. That is not common. That is special." Owen did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. "I have been observing you carefully these past 2 days, Sirath continued. "I see how Piprixal and Flickrath respond to you. I see how you have adapted your home and your life to accommodate them. I see the research you have done, the care you take to meet their needs despite having no training or background in Drachnir biology. I am just doing my best." "Yes," Sirath agreed. "And your best has been enough to keep them alive, healthy, and emotionally stable. That is remarkable." They reached the edge of the bee yard where the forest began. Sirath turned to face Owen directly, her star-filled scales catching the afternoon light. "Tomorrow is the 3rd day," she said. "Tomorrow I must make my decision about the hatchling's future. Before I do, I need to explain your options clearly." Owen's chest tightened, but he nodded. "Option 1, Sirath said. The hatchlings return with us to Paraxis, our homeworld. They will be placed with foster families from their extended clan. They will receive proper education in Drachnir culture, history, and tradition. They will grow up among their own people, knowing who they are and where they come from. But they will be traumatized by separation from me," Owen said quietly. "Yes," Sirath admitted. "Initially, there will be significant emotional distress. With time and proper care, they will likely adapt. But there is risk. Some hatchlings who lose their bonded caregivers never fully recover. I cannot guarantee they would thrive. What is option 2? Sirath's expression became more complex. "Option 2 is unprecedented in Drachnir history. We have never done this before. But the Council has authorized me to offer it if I believe it is in the best interest of the hatchlings." She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "You would come with us to Paraxis. You would be recognized as the legal guardian of Piprixal and Flickrath under Drachnir law. You would live among my people in a dwelling we provide, with resources and support for raising the hatchlings. You would receive training in Drachnir customs and child-rearing practices. The hatchlings would maintain their bond with you while also growing up immersed in their culture." Owen stared at her, unable to process what he was hearing. "You want me to leave Thornwood? Leave my home, my farm, everything I know?" "I am offering you the choice," Sirath corrected. "If you refuse, we will proceed with option 1. I will not force you to abandon your life. But if you choose to come, you would be doing something profound. You would be raising children who are not your species in a world that is not your own, surrounded by people who are nothing like you. It would be difficult. It would be lonely at times. You would be giving up everything familiar. For how long?" "Until the hatchlings reach maturity," Sirath said. "Roughly 12 years in human time. After that, they would be adults capable of making their own choices about where they live and who they live with." Owen looked across the bee yard to where Pip and Flicker were playing. As he watched, Pip tumbled over its own feet and chirped in distress. Flicker immediately rushed over, helping the smaller hatchling up with gentle nudges. The moment was so simple, so innocent, and it broke something open in Owen's chest. "Can I think about it?" he asked, his voice rough. "You have until tomorrow evening," Sireth replied. "I know this is not an easy choice. Take whatever time you need." That night, Owen sat in his chair by the fire, unable to sleep. Pip and Flicker were curled up on the blankets, peaceful and content. They had no idea that their entire future hung in the balance of one old man's decision. Owen thought about his farm, his bees, his quiet life. He thought about his small house with its familiar furniture and worn floors. He thought about his friends in the settlement, the routines he had built over 15 years. Then he thought about two small creatures crawling through a forest, hurt and alone, searching desperately for help. He thought about the way Pip chirped when happy, the way Flicker hummed while eating. He thought about teaching them to read, watching them discover honey, feeling their absolute trust when they fell asleep against him. He thought about who he was and who he wanted to be. By the time the sun rose on the third day, Owen had made his choice. Sirath arrived at sunset on the third day, alone this time. She found Owen sitting on his porch with Pip and Flicker, watching the bees return to their hives for the night. The golden light made everything look soft and peaceful, like a painting of a perfect moment. "Have you decided?" Sirath asked, settling herself on the porch steps with surprising grace for someone her size. Owen nodded. He had barely slept in 3 days, but his mind was clear. "I need to ask you something first. Why are you offering this? You could take them by force if you wanted. You have the law on your side." "Because the law is meant to protect children, not harm them," Sirath replied. "And because I have spent 3 days watching you with them. I see how they look at you. I feel how they trust you. Taking them from you would break something in them that might never heal properly. I cannot do that and call myself honorable. But you are asking me to give up everything." "I am asking you to choose," Sirath corrected gently. "Choose your quiet life or choose them. Both are valid choices. Both are understandable. But you cannot have both." Owen was quiet for a moment, stroking Pip's scales as the small hatchling dozed in his lap. Flicker was curled around his feet, making soft humming sounds. "I spent 40 years teaching children," Owen said finally, "hundreds of students over the decades. I taught them mathematics and literature and how to think critically. I was good at my job. I cared about those kids. But at the end of each school year, they moved on. They graduated, they went to new classes, they forgot about me. That is how it is supposed to work." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I retired here because I wanted peace. I wanted a life where nothing changed, where every day was predictable and calm. I had earned that, I thought. After all those years of noise and chaos and dealing with problems that were never really mine to solve." Flicker stirred at his feet, and Owen reached down to scratch behind the hatchling's head ridge. "But then I found these two under my beehive and everything changed. They were dying. They were terrified. They had lost everything, and when I picked them up and brought them inside, they looked at me like I was their entire world, because in that moment I was." Owen looked up at Sirath, and his eyes were bright with emotion he no longer tried to hide. "I cannot go back to my quiet life and pretend I never met them. I cannot hand them over to strangers, even kind strangers, and walk away. They chose me when they had nothing. The least I can do is choose them back." Sirath made a sound that was distinctly Drachnir, a complex harmony that Owen's human voice could never reproduce. When she spoke, her voice was warm. "Then you will come with us to Paraxis. You will raise Piprixal and Flickrath as their guardian. The council will provide you with everything you need. A home, resources, teachers to help you understand our ways. You will not be alone in this. When do we leave?" "1 week," Sirath replied. "That will give you time to arrange your affairs, to say goodbye to your friends, to prepare yourself mentally for the journey." The next 7 days were a blur of activity. Owen met with Administrator Lee to transfer ownership of his farm to Mrs. Okafor, who promised to care for his bees and maintain the property. He sorted through his possessions, packing only the essentials and a few sentimental items. Everything else was sold or given away. His friends in the settlement were shocked by his decision. Some thought he was being foolish, giving up his comfortable retirement for the unknown. Others understood, or at least tried to. Mrs. Okafor hugged him tightly on his last day, tears in her eyes. "You are doing a brave thing," she said. "Those children are lucky to have you." I am lucky to have them, Owen replied. The journey to Paraxis took 3 weeks on the Drachnir vessel. The ship was beautiful and alien, with curved walls that seemed to pulse with gentle light. Pip and Flicker adapted quickly, their natural instincts responding to the Drachnir environment. Owen spent the journey learning basic Drachnir language and customs from Sirath, trying to prepare himself for a world he could barely imagine. When they finally arrived, Owen's first view of Paraxis took his breath away. Mountains of crystallized volcanic glass rose from forests that glowed with bioluminescent plants. The sky was a deep purple and 3 moons hung in careful alignment. Adult Drachnir filled the air, flying on thermals, their scales catching the light like living jewels. Sirath had arranged a dwelling for him on the edge of a Drachnir settlement. It was a hybrid structure, designed with both human and Drachnir needs in mind. The main room had a fireplace for Owen, and heated stone platforms for the hatchlings. The furniture was scaled for human use, but the ceilings were high enough for adult Drachnir to visit comfortably. The first few months were difficult. Owen struggled with the language, with the customs, with the feeling of being utterly foreign in every possible way. But slowly, with Sirath's patient guidance and support from the local community, he found his footing. He discovered that his beekeeping knowledge translated surprisingly well to understanding Drachnir social structures. He learned to read the emotional harmonics that filled every conversation. He adapted his teaching methods to work with Drachnir concepts of education and child development. Pip and Flicker thrived. They attended lessons with other young Drachnir, learning their history and traditions, but each evening they came home to Owen. They still curled up with him by the fire. They still listened to his stories. They still trusted him completely. One evening, about 6 months after their arrival, Owen sat on his porch watching the sunset. The 3 moons were beginning to rise, and the air was filled with the sounds of Drachnir flying overhead. Pip and Flicker played in the yard, their wings now strong enough for short gliding flights. They were laughing, a sound that combined human-like giggles with Drachnir harmonics. Sirath found him there, as she often did in the evenings. She had become a good friend, checking on them regularly and offering guidance when needed. "How are you adjusting?" she asked, settling beside him. Owen smiled, watching the hatchlings chase each other in circles. "It is strange. This world is nothing like home. The gravity is different, the air tastes different, even the colors are different. By all rights, I should be miserable. But you are not?" "No," Owen said, and he realized it was true. "I am not. I miss Thornwood sometimes. I miss my bees and my old kitchen, and knowing exactly how each day would unfold. But when I look at those two, when I see them happy and healthy and growing into who they are meant to be, I know I made the right choice." Pip noticed them talking and came running over, climbing into Owen's lap, despite being almost too big for it now. Flicker followed more sedately, pressing against Owen's side. Both hatchlings began their evening routine of telling Owen about their day, mixing English words with Drachnir sounds in their own unique language. Owen listened, asking questions, laughing at their stories. Above them, the stars began to appear, constellations he was still learning to name. Everything was different. Everything was strange. Everything was exactly where he was supposed to be. Sirath watched the human and the 2 young Drachnir, and she felt satisfaction deep in her soul. This strange little family, formed by tragedy and sustained by love, had found their place in the universe. Not through force or obligation, but through the simple choice to care when caring was needed. "You know," Sirath said quietly, "in our language we have a word for what you did. Kareshlin. It means the one who builds bridges between worlds, who makes family from strangers, who chooses love over comfort." "What does it translate to in English?" Owen asked. Sirath smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth that somehow seemed gentle in that moment. "The closest word would be father." Owen felt tears sting his eyes, but he did not wipe them away. He simply held his children closer, 2 dragon hatchlings who had asked a beekeeper for help and received a lifetime of love in return. In the distance, other Drachnir families were settling in for the evening. Smoke rose from fires, voices called out in greeting, and the community continued its ancient rhythms. And in one small hybrid dwelling on the edge of the settlement, an old human man read stories to 2 young dragons, his voice carrying out into the purple twilight, a sound of home in a world that should have been alien but somehow was not.